The Baltimore Ravens emerge victorious in week 1 against the New York Jets. We dive into a full game recap, talking about what went right, what went wrong, and more next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher, Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. That includes over on YouTube. And we're back here, our first victory Monday of the 2022 season. It comes in week 1, Baltimore starting off the year 1-0. Pretty dominant win, a 24-9 victory over the New York Jets. And look, it was pretty sloppy to start. We'll talk about this, but pretty sloppy to start overall. But then a dominant second half where the Jets really couldn't do anything on the offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, special teams wise. Baltimore won there also. So all three phases, Baltimore dominating in the second half of this game. We'll talk about it here today. We'll dive into the offense in the first segment, dive into the defensive performance in the second segment. Then in the final segment, just talk about where this team goes next, a little bit about their week 2 game against Miami and stuff of that nature. So we have a ton to talk about today. And again, before we dive into our content, if you're here with us on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in today and subscribing to this channel. If you have, thank you so much. If you haven't, we put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week, Monday through Friday. So if you want daily Ravens news, analysis, updates, we have you covered here Monday through Friday. Also in audio form. Thank you so much for following along. Same show, both audio and video form. Be sure to follow along there as well. And follow me on Twitter at CalShark34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. Let's now dive into our recap of this game. And this is a really exciting one because one of the things that I was really impressed with, and I kind of mentioned it, the fact that Baltimore started off so slow, the fact that they were able to kind of dig themselves out of the rut they were in and put on a really big performance in the second half of this game. The offense in the first, it started to get a little better towards the end of the first half, but it still wasn't great. The second half was a completely different story. But we saw a team that couldn't run the ball, and the run game wasn't great the entire game. We'll talk about that. But the passing game, some of the play calls weren't great from Greg Roman. I thought Greg Roman improved over the course of the game. I think that the early returns weren't very positive for Greg Roman. We saw a lot of these short passing concepts weren't really going anywhere. But then I think he got creative with stuff. And look, we saw deep shots. We saw stuff that I think people want to see in terms of opening up the playbook a little bit. Now, I still think the Ravens can do a little more, but I think it was a good thing from what we saw early on and kind of what that vibe was on offense to what we ended up getting in the second half. So I thought that was very encouraging. On the day, Lamar Jackson finished a solid day, I'd say overall. 17-30, 213, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. So nothing super spectacular, but did he make some spectacular plays? He had the one where he avoided the sack. He kind of like skip-stepped out of the sack on a third down play and created a first down out of it. That was an incredible play. The 55-yard bomb touchdown to Rashad Bateman, which was incredible in its own right. 2 touchdown passes to Devin Duvernay, who we'll talk about. He played, I think, a very solid game and, look, did more than enough to help the Ravens win this one. The team had to kind of, again, weather that early storm, but I think Jackson also got out of the mini rut he was in. There were a couple throws for him that were a little low, a little inaccurate, but he also had some beautiful ones. So this is a game where, look, a lot of the Ravens starters didn't play in the preseason. So it makes sense when you look at the trajectory of the game on all 3 phases. You look at the offense, look at the defense. They had to knock some of the rust off, and I think they did that over the course of the first half. Some things weren't going the right way. There was a lot of energy on the Jets side defensively early on. You know, they went into this game pretty confident, it looked like, which, hey, good for them. That's how you should approach this game. But I think the better team won in this circumstance. I think that Baltimore just capitalized on more opportunities. I think when you're looking at what the Jets were able to do on the offensive side of the ball in the first half, yeah, they were all right, but we'll talk about that in the second segment. In terms of actual stats here, Baltimore ended up going 5-13 on third down. Total 274 total yards, so nothing too special there. 5.2 yards per play. Held the ball for 27 minutes and 30 seconds. The Jets actually held the ball for longer than Baltimore did, but Baltimore wasn't really running the ball super effectively. And not that Lamar Jackson had like 80 pass attempts or anything, but Lamar Jackson had 30 pass attempts and the Ravens had 21 rushes. So the Ravens prioritizing the pass game a little bit there, which I think was the right decision because we can kind of go into the ground game now. Nothing was working. Nothing. Well, okay, I'm not going to say nothing, but barely anything was working for them on the ground, especially early on where, look, in order to have a successful offense, you have to have your run game feed off your pass game feed off your run game. Baltimore's run game was not doing anything. The Jets were stacking the box, and the Ravens were trying to establish their ground game, and they just could not do it because their pass game wasn't hitting either. So the Jets said, hey, you know what? If you're not hitting on your passes, we're just going to stack the box until you do something. And the Ravens ended up doing something. They ended up going out and dominating the second half, and a lot of that had to do with some of the passes Lamar Jackson threw. But on the ground as a whole, Baltimore averaged just 3 yards per carry. Kenyon Drake, 11 carries for 31 yards. He led the team in carries and yards, 2.8 yards per carry. Lamar Jackson, 6 for 17. That's also 2.8 yards per carry. Mike Davis had 2 for 11. That's 5.5 yards per carry. He had a long of 10. So that was like the most exciting thing we saw from their ground game. But he also fumbled on his long run. So that was something to keep in mind. And Justice Hill, 2 for 4. So they were definitely missing a fully healthy J.K. Dobbins, fully healthy Ronnie Stanley. Juwan James goes down in the second quarter with a torn Achilles. Just a super, super tough break. I feel for Juwan James. Prayers out to him. It's just he worked so hard to get back to where he was, and starting in week 1 for the Ravens in place of Ronnie Stanley, who was inactive for this game. J.K. Dobbins also inactive for this game, and goes down. It didn't look good to start. He kind of favored. He middle of the play kind of just gives out on him, and the replay it's hard to watch. And so for a player that again has worked so hard to get back to where he was, to have that happen, another torn Achilles. John Harbaugh clarified a little different from last time, but still, it's just another blow depth-wise to the offensive line. Patrick McCary comes in, so that's gonna, until Ronnie Stanley's able to come back, that's gonna be the guy for them. But that's the situation on the offensive line for now. And then, receiving wise, I mentioned Bateman and Duvernay. Bateman had 2 catches for 59 yards and a score, a 55-yard beautiful touchdown. I mean, really, the Bateman to Jackson, or Jackson to Bateman connection is going to be really fun to watch this year. It's almost like the Jackson to Andrews connection, which was going strong in this game. But the ability for those two, Jackson and Bateman, to get on the same page with each other. Bateman had an interesting game. Like, the first half for Bateman was pretty rough. He had a couple of plays where he had a ball that he probably should have hung on to. He got hit, but number one wide receivers, you look at the names around the league, they hold on to balls like that. So you're expecting Bateman to kind of make that catch, hold on to the play. Also, there was a play, a deep shot from Lamar Jackson where, look, I don't know. Honestly, I doubt that Rashad Bateman would have gotten to the football if he had kept running, but it looked like he had a shot at it. Like, probably not a very good one because it was a pretty off-target pass from Lamar Jackson, but it reminded me a little bit of the Sammy Watkins play. Now, not totally, right? I'm not blaming Bateman for anything right now, but I don't know. It just felt like he could have ran under the ball a little bit more, but he gave up a little early. But I'm not, again, it's kind of lost now. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because Baltimore didn't win the game. And I think that there's probably not a great chance he would have caught the ball anyway. But yeah, just something I observed, nothing too crazy. But then the connection for Jackson and Bateman to get there, if he had the game that he did without that connection, it would have been rough. His final stat line would have been 1 reception for 4 yards, and people would have been like, where's Rashad Bateman? What's Rashad Bateman? And I said that. I said one of the key matchups was going to be Sauce Gardner versus Rashad Bateman. Bateman ends up, bringing it for the long touchdown. So, yeah, a tale of 2 halves for Rashad Bateman, definitely, but very glad to see him get on the board with his first touchdown of the year. Devin Duvernay, 4 for 54 and 2 scores. He had a phenomenal catch in the back of the end zone, cornerish of the end zone, where Jackson just hit him in the right spot, and Duvernay goes up there and he hauls that thing in. It was awesome. Then another score later in the game, Duvernay had 2 touchdowns his entire 2 years, his first 2 years in the league, 2 touchdowns. First game of his third year, 2 touchdowns, already matched that total. So the Ravens are looking for people to step up. Devin Duvernay certainly stepped up. on Sunday against the Jets. Mark Andrews led the team in receptions with 5, had 52 yards. No scores for him. DeMarcus Robinson, 2 for 19. Then you had Kenny and Drake, 1 for 15. Patrick Ricard, 1 for 7. And Justice Hill, 2 for 7. Isaiah Likely was targeted 4 times, did not catch a ball. And Tyler Wallace targeted 1 time, did not catch a ball. So, yeah, I mean, look, the offense started slow, definitely was sloppy. They had to find their offensive identity. They were struggling in so many areas. The run game was not working. The pass game was not working. The Jets defense was flying around the field. It was really, really rough for the first, I'd say, probably 28-ish, 27-ish minutes, something in that line. Right at the end of the first half, stuff started to, I think, break free for them a little bit. And the second half it's a different story overall. But just knocking the rust off was really big for them. I think that was important. We'll talk about that a bit in the second segment with the defense. So we'll head into our first break. Coming up, we're going to be diving into the defensive unit, talking about their 2 halves and what ended up happening for them. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about BriteCo. And we've all seen the engagement fails online. You don't want to be that guy, and you certainly don't want it to be splattered all over the internet. The guys at BriteCo Jewelry Insurance will make sure you get a replacement for the full value of that ring, no matter if it's lost, stolen, or you just can't figure out what happened to it. And insurance can be a pain sometimes, but the guys at BriteCo turn the whole experience around. That's probably the easiest thing you can do for yourself this week. There are no excuses. For $5 a month, you get totally comprehensive coverage, and it won't take you more than 2 minutes on your cell phone. Check it out, brite.co/locked on. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day here and tuning in. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Follow us along in audio form as well. But let's talk about the defense. And the offense, we kind of dove into them a little bit. How, look, really, really struggled to find their offensive identity early on, but ended up kind of having a really good second half. Well, I think the defense, there were some areas they struggled early on, definitely, but I don't think when you're talking about absolute just terribleness, for lack of a better word, overall, like the Baltimore offense was pretty bad for a decent amount of time in the first half. The Baltimore defense was, I think, okay in the first half. I mean, look, the whole game they gave up just 9 points overall. They gave up 3 through the first 3 quarters. The Jets' only touchdown of the game came with like a minute left in the fourth quarter. So the defense played very well overall. But there were some missed tackles, which I think they did clean up in the second half. But, you want to leave those in 2021. There were a couple by Kyle Hamilton, some here and there. But they cleaned up on it, which, again, you see the growth from the first part of the game to the second part of the game. That's really what I wanted to see, and that's what we got. So I was very pleased with that. Baltimore's third down defense was one of the bright spots for me. Held the Jets to 0 of 6 in the first half on third down, which was great. The Jets were getting into situations where they could have converted, could have kept moving the chains, could have pushed the ball down the field. Baltimore would not let them, even though there were some spectacular. I mean, Garrett Wilson, the Joe Flacco, Garrett Wilson had that one where Joe Flacco escaped and ran around and threw it to Garrett Wilson. Wilson dodged 3 people or something, got 1 yard away from the first down. So it's plays like those where you're thinking, oh, this is going to go for a first down because why not? And then, they're a yard short or 2 yards short. So the Ravens end up finishing the game third down defense-wise. They hold the Jets to 2 of 14 on third down. The Jets did complete 3 of 4 fourth downs, but that was, I guess, that was later in the game, late in the fourth quarter when the Jets were just trying to score down 24-3. So that was a different story. But the Jets ended up getting 378 total yards. This was more game script than anything else, though. I mean, Joe Flacco threw the ball 59 times. So that's a lot of passes. I'm not going to lie. Joe Burrow threw it 55 times, I believe, in their week 1 loss to Pittsburgh. But Flacco finishing 37 of 59, 307 yards. He had 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The Ravens held the Jets to just 17 carries. They did average 4.9 yards on the ground, but, that was a long of 22 by Michael Carter. You had a long of 14 by Breece Hall. So take out that 36, and, it looks a lot better for Baltimore overall. Carter had 10 for 60. Breece Hall had 6 for 23. He had a fumble, and then Joe Flacco had 1 for 0 overall. But I was pleased with the defense. There were a lot of contributors, too. I mean, Marcus Williams, talk about a Baltimore debut. Marcus Williams, first of all, worth the money. 100%. And not like it was ever a question, right? Like, I haven't been sitting here saying it was a bad deal for Baltimore. I thought that they did the right thing by signing him and spending a lot of money on him. He is a player that deserved that contract. And look, he showed it 100% in this game. Led the team in tackles with 12. He also had his first interception. You know, Baltimore's been looking for kind of someone to roam the back half and kind of lurk around and take advantage of bad throws, and Marcus Williams absolutely did that against Joe Flacco. Gets his first interception in a Baltimore uniform. Other guys I was super impressed with, Patrick Queen, unbelievable day for him. Big credit to Patrick Queen. This was a big year for him, right? It's a big year to prove himself after a couple up and down years in the league where, look, the flashes that he has shown have been incredible, and the lows that we have seen have not been good. We saw the flashes. We saw what he can be. And look, Patrick Queen has said that he had the best year of his career, felt really comfortable and confident with Mike Macdonald on the team, and him around the team as the inside linebackers coach. Macdonald goes to Michigan, has the rough start to the year, comes on strong to end the season. Macdonald comes back as a defensive coordinator, and Patrick Queen is just flying all over the field. So I was very impressed with Patrick Queen overall. Looked confident out there, finished with 8 tackles. Chuck Clark was second on the team, by the way, with 9. The Ravens also get to Joe Flacco 3 times overall. You had Patrick Queen with half a sack, and Justin Madubuike with half a sack. And I want to shout out him too. Justin Madubuike had a phenomenal performance. He was all over the field, crushing guys and getting interior pressure and running down guys. He was all over the place. And this is the breakout that I expected from him last year. Well, obviously, it's been one game. You can't call it a breakout till it's consistent performances, right? But he showed what I think a lot of people have been waiting on from him. And if he's able to continue that trend and just continue to play the way he did in week 1, it's going to help Calais Campbell out. It's going to help Michael Pierce out. It's going to help Brent Urban out, because they can rotate in these quality young defensive linemen to save some of the snaps of Calais Campbell and Michael Pierce and Brent Urban, who, look, you want to save those guys for November, December, January, not like never play them until then. Like, you want to have those guys on the field. But Calais Campbell played so many snaps last year. You want to have everybody fresh, and the Ravens love their rotations. We have seen it with the cornerback room, with the running back room, tight ends, right? We've seen it all over the place with them. It's not surprising they have so much depth on the defensive line. It is still one of my favorite positional groups, and part of that is because of the way that Michael Pierce performed on Sunday. Like, what a performance for him too. He was all over the place, generating some interior pressure, forcing the run game as well. This is why the Ravens signed him, and part of the reason that the Ravens went with Pierce over Brandon Williams was the fact that Williams was a pure 2-down player at that point in his career. Had never really been someone to generate interior pressure, never was somebody to get to the quarterback. Great, unbelievable run stuffer, but maybe you lose like a little bit of the run stuffing in Pierce, who was still a great run stuffer in his own right, but you get a lot of interior pass rush from the nose tackle position. And we saw that overall. Michael Pierce just, again, he showed why the Ravens brought him in. I thought it was a good move when it happened, and he showed that overall. Marlon Humphrey had 7 tackles. Malik Harrison had 5. Calais Campbell had a sack. Justin Houston also had a sack. Justin Houston looked like he was 25 out there. He was shooting. It looked like he was shot out of a cannon. He looked spry out there, and I know there are a lot of questions about, what are the Ravens going to do outside linebacker wise? With Odafe Oweh, Justin Houston being the only 2 healthy outside linebackers, I still think they need to do something. We'll talk about that in the final segment. But look, if Justin Houston plays like that, it's gonna be a good year for the Ravens, because they can use him in a lot of different ways. But again, you don't want to overutilize him. But he had a sack, I think, called back as well. Or no, it was a incompletion, but he leveled Joe Flacco. The Ravens had a couple of those where like they were almost to Joe Flacco, but then it was an incompletion or there was a penalty that negated a sack. And Justin Madubuike could have had a sack, but another one. He had half a sack. He could have had 1.5, but there was something, I think. And Broderick Washington also, he leveled Joe Flacco. And then a play there were little ticky-tack plays in the secondary, like defensive holding, illegal contact, stuff like that negated some really good plays. But, it's fine because the Ravens won the game. It's stuff you can clean up overall. Other than that, though, the one area, I think, again, Kyle Hamilton did miss some tackles. I think that's something that he'll have to clean up over the course of his rookie year. He wasn't necessarily a prolific tackler at Notre Dame, but He's someone who I think can learn. He has super high upside and did show some flashes in this one. Kyle Fuller suffered what looked like a really, really bad injury. Apparently, CBS was told not to show it because the replay was so brutal. John Harbaugh expressed some hope about the injury. We'll see. There's been nothing at the time of this recording. But if the Ravens do lose Kyle Fuller, and we'll get into this in the final segment too, the Ravens could look to the outside to bring in somebody else. But overall, yes, very impressed with the Baltimore defense. Didn't let the Jets get much of anything going for the entire game. And we saw a suffocating performance through three quarters. And honestly, through all four, the touchdown, if a penalty here, a penalty there didn't happen, the Jets probably aren't getting into that end zone. So I thought Baltimore's defense was lights out in this game for the most part. And I was impressed overall. But we'll head into our final break. Still to come, we'll be diving into what's next for this team. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about PrizePicks. And fantasy has been super fun for me for a really long time. I'd say I had a pretty good, successful first week of fantasy for the 2022 season, which I'm pretty happy about. But for PrizePicks, it's super easy to use. And you can have a ton of different entries. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less in their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projection on any sport that you watch. That includes the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, you have NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. You can have safe and fast withdrawals. They're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKED ON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKED ON at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. We're back here with our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. Thank you so much for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. But yeah, in terms of what's next for the Ravens and just where they go, well, they'll go home. They're going home to M&T Bank Stadium, playing the Miami Dolphins in week 2. Miami ended up taking care of business in their week 1 game against the New England Patriots. They are 1-0. Baltimore is 1-0. But in the AFC North right now, you have 3 teams at 1-0 in the Baltimore Ravens, you got Cleveland, and then you got the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those 3 teams 1-0, and then the Browns and the Steelers getting wins on last-second field goals. The Browns against Carolina and the Steelers against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's the only team in the AFC North now with an 0-1 record. So there's something to keep an eye on there. Joe Burrow had 5 turnovers in the games, and for the Browns, they got the job done, against Baker Mayfield, their old quarterback over there. But this is a very talented AFC overall. Again, very talented AFC North. You can never count out the Pittsburgh Steelers. But a couple of injuries to keep in mind. We talked about the Ravens with Juwan James and Kyle Fuller. TJ Watt, at the time of this recording, nothing has been confirmed yet, but it's believed that he tore his pec, the same injury that Marlon Humphrey had back when he tore it against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll see what that timeline is. It would cost him probably most, if not all, of the season. So if that's the case and how severe it is, we'll find out. But yeah, I think for now, what you look at with the Baltimore side of things and just where they go now, I think establishing the ground game is super important for them. This is a situation where for the people who watched the team last year and kind of understand that, oh, look, this was a team that finished top 10 in a lot of rushing categories, but the rushing offense was not that, or it was not great compared to what people had gotten used to. And look, right, there's no J.K. Dobbins, there's no Gus Edwards, Ronnie Stanley's still working his way back. There's stuff that's understandable there. But as I've said, you got to feed both your run game and your pass game off of each other. The Ravens ran a successful screen for the first time, and I don't know how long it's been. So it's fun to see that aspect of things because it's something I've been saying where it felt like the Ravens have wanted to utilize the running backs out of the backfield a lot more this year, and it felt like it last year before the Dobbins and Edwards injuries. But you see that screen to Kenyon Drake, and he takes it. He takes it a decent amount of yards, and you're thinking, oh, this could be something. So hopefully we'll see the returns of J.K. Dobbins, Marcus Peters, Ronnie Stanley in week 2. If I had to guess, I'd probably say that Peters and Dobbins return, and Stanley might wait until week 3. The Ravens, I'm sure, want to give him just a super long runway of practice time, like all their guys, obviously. Another surprise in this game against the Jets was the Ravens decided to activate Josh Oliver over Nick Boyle. Wasn't any indication that Boyle was injured or anything. Had a rest day, was what it was classified as on Friday. So this might have just been a field conditions situation where he wasn't able to. The Ravens just wanted to play it a little cautious, but hopefully Boyle is able to come back and play in this game against Miami. I think he's super important to the run game in general. But you want to be able to use the play action, right? If the run game isn't working, the play action threat doesn't really do what it's supposed to do. Plus, if you want to, I think, have successful play action, you get into second and short situations using the run game. If you pick up 6, 7 yards, something I've talked about before on the show, I've talked about it multiple times. If you can do that, then teams begin to stack the box. You can have the play action happen. They will bite on that. You can use guys like Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, et cetera, and you can punish the defense for stacking the box. Baltimore wasn't punishing the Jets early on for stacking the box because the pass game was not working and the run game was not working. Or, then later in the game, and then the pass game ended up working and then it was fine. But we saw if the run game wasn't working for Baltimore, a lot wasn't working for them. And that's not to say they can't throw the football because they literally showed they could do it. But that's something I'd like to see. The ground game definitely getting improved upon. I think for the defense is just continuing to keep the momentum. I mean, this is a very talented group. The Ravens have invested heavily in their defense. And the secondary, of course, that's an area where they've historically invested quite a bit of money, quite a bit of draft capital as well. But I think for the cornerback situation, if you really do have Kyle Fuller down for a significant amount of time, maybe even this season, depending on how serious the injury is, maybe Baltimore does look to the outside to bring in somebody just to have. They do have some guys on the practice squad. They could call up. Daryl Worley's one of those guys. Maybe Kevon Seymour, depending on where he is. But one of my bold predictions was at the trade deadline, Baltimore go out and acquire a star cornerback. And part of that is because where are you comfortable if you're the Ravens putting Marcus Peters in? What situations early on? If Kyle Fuller goes down and Marcus Peters is kind of limited coming back, your second corner is limited, your third corner is down for the year or a significant amount of time, depending on the injury, whatever it is. So what are you going to do? Is it going to be Pepe Williams, Jalen Armour-Davis, Brandon Stevens had a great pass breakup, by the way. I forgot to mention this in the second segment. Brandon Stevens played a really good game. I was very impressed with him overall. But you can use some of those guys, but at the same time, you've already lost a corner. Your other corner's working his way back. So what if somebody else goes down? What if two guys go down? We've seen it historically. It's happened. It has happened majority of the seasons, unfortunately, which is Baltimore starts the year with 50 healthy cornerbacks. They end the year with 2. So we heard them sniffing around Xavier Howard at the trade deadline last year. Maybe something like that happens again. Eric DeCosta, not afraid to improve this team, not afraid to explore any avenue and make a move that some people maybe aren't expecting. So we'll see that overall. Also, another funny note, Josh Ross made his impact felt on the first play of this game on special teams. He runs down the field and gets the special teams tackle, which is funny, just continuing that momentum into the regular season. But yeah, look, I think Baltimore's in a good spot. The first half of the game definitely caused some questions to arise, especially about the offensive side of the ball. But, it almost is like the preseason tune-up for these guys because, Lamar Jackson didn't play, Mark Andrews didn't play, Rashad Bateman didn't play. A lot of these starters did not play in the preseason, so they need to get that rust off. I think this stretch, the AFC East stretch, as I call it, you have the Jets, which has been a win. You then have Miami, New England, Buffalo. If you come out of that stretch 3-1, you're looking great. I think that's great shape to be in. Obviously, 4-0 is what you want, but if you go out 3-1, I think that's a great situation. 2-2, I think that's I think you're fine if you go 2-2. I think 3-1 is realistic. I do. Buffalo looks like a challenge. I'm not gonna lie, but I think Baltimore can beat Miami. I think they can beat New England. I think they can beat Buffalo too. I'm not saying they can't do that, but if they can go out of that stretch 3-1, if you're talking about what's next, I think they put themselves in a good spot overall because their next 3 teams are talented opponents, right? Not that the Jets aren't talented. They have very talented guys, but you think of Miami, think of New England, think of Buffalo. Those are teams that are better than the Jets, right? So I'm pretty sure that the Ravens would be happy with a 3-1 record in those first 4 games. They're kind of setting themselves up for a pretty decent back half of the season there if they do that. So we'll see what they end up doing. But in week 1, Baltimore does get the 24-9 victory over the New York Jets, starting their season off strong with a dominant win. And the best part of it, I'll leave it with this. The best part, I think, is they were able to overcome that slow start. They didn't let it get them down, didn't let it get in their heads. Even though the offense wasn't hitting on really any cylinders overall, the defense had a couple struggles here and there if you're talking about missed tackles or whatnot. I think that the fact that they were able to overcome that slow start and say to themselves, this is not who we are. We can play better football than this. And they did. They went out there and they dominated the second half. I think that shows their resiliency, something we've seen from John Harbaugh-led teams for years now. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in here today. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow.